Take 60 seconds here, say hi to your neighbor for me.
What up?
Say what up.
What up?
Neighbor, compliment him on the mask.
I'm Chris. Good job, man. How was it?
Oh, awesome.
Do you remember? Awesome.
All right. Well, good afternoon. Oh yeah, I can do this. I'm special. How are we doing this afternoon? We feeling okay? I like that Dan and Wyatt both talked about sacrifice, because I think last week celebrating Easter together was so special, it was so much fun, it was so heartwarming, and then this week we all remembered that church is kind of hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to do this every week. We've gotten very comfortable, we've gotten very safe in our homes, and if you're live streaming, we love you. Don't worry, it's okay that you're not here. You're still with us in spirit. But doing this in person is tough. It's going to take some stretching. It's like when you've been seated too long in a movie theater, and you're like, oh, that's not working the way it used to. We're going to have to kind of stretch out and get comfortable with each other again, and doing this thing that we do. We're talking about crossing the Jordan this afternoon, and we're starting our river series. So last 3 months, actually, we've talked about the desert. We've talked about desert ideas and about sometimes God leads us into dry places, into arid places, because He has something to say to us. And it's been fun, and it's been encouraging, and I hope impactful for you to see that. To see that God has some things to say to you still. And even though we've been in COVID times, even though we went through a nuclear winter here somehow in the Tri-Cities, God was saying things the whole time. And today, after Easter, which I think is a cool break point, we are starting to cross the river. And I'm very excited about what that means for us and for our fellowship. Today, I want to talk about how there are some stories in the Bible that are movements, and there are some stories in the Bible that are moments. You know what I mean by that? Movements and moments. You guys have been saving up your yeahs and your come on bros for about 9 months. I'd love to hear it from you today. If you got it, I'd love to have it. Come on, bro. Let's hear it, bro. Amen, bro. All right, there are movements and there are moments. Oh, that feels so good. You have no idea. I've been preaching to my dog for 6 months. This is way better. No disrespect to my dog if she's on the live stream somehow. There are movements and there are moments. When Jesus turned resolutely and started going into Jerusalem, that was a movement, right? He was doing one thing and he turned and he set out resolutely to go do a different thing. That's a movement. The resurrection, which we talked about last week, that's a moment. And that is, I'd say, the defining moment of our faith. Can I get an amen for that one? Amen. The defining moment of our faith. When the Israelites crossed through the Red Sea, that was a movement, right? They're moving out of Egypt and into a new phase in their relationship with God. But I would say that Moses in the burning bush, that's a moment. That's a special moment that Moses gets to share with God. He is starting a new journey, but it is a specific moment. And today, we're going to talk about a story in Joshua 3. You can turn over there if you like.
All right.
In Joshua 3, my name is Josh, by the way, if you haven't met. I'm like, who's this skinny dude? In Joshua 3, that is a movement and a moment. There are some stories in the Bible that are both. What? How is that possible? A movement and a moment. And I like to think, as a church, that we are doing both right now. We're in movement as a church. We're moving out of darkness and into light, perpetually, right? We're moving out of our homes and into this barn. We are moving out of COVID and into fellowship and relationship and hugs. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Handshakes maybe, if you're not too comfortable with hugs. We're moving as a church. But we're also in a moment. This is a moment where we get to decide what kind of church we want to be moving forward. Whatever happened in the past, we'll deal with the past. We'll talk about the past today. But we get to decide what our future looks like as a church. And maybe you're just visiting us today. We're very grateful for that. Or if you're live streaming and you're like, how did I find this Facebook page? Thanks for being here. Maybe you're having a movement right now. Maybe you're moving out of one phase of your life and into a new one. We're going to talk about that today. Maybe you're in a moment. Maybe this is the first church service you've ever been to or ever watched online. That's a moment, and it's a special moment, and I'm glad that we get to share it together. So movements and moments. That's what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to talk about the river. I'm very excited to talk about the river and all of the interesting and fun and encouraging things that happen there at the river. In the river, at the river, we're going to talk about purity. We're going to talk about cleansing, refreshment. We're going to talk about provision, God's provision for us, that He keeps supplying us with drinkable water, so to speak. We're going to talk about being in step with God's flow, God's timing. How do I stay in step with the river? We'll talk about living water, whatever that means. And the thing we're going to talk about today is this idea of boundary lines. Now, a river, specifically in this time, and even today, the river creates boundary lines. We know this. What separates Pasco from Kennewick and Richmond? It's that giant river that you guys cross probably every single day, right? There are boundary lines. And in our hearts, spiritually, there are boundary lines that are rivers. That's the word I'm going to use to define these boundary lines. There are boundary lines in our lives, right? Maybe you were single, and you are now not single, Jack and Whitney. Why? A couple other people. That's a boundary line. You were this, and now you're that. And things have changed. And I'm becoming a new person because of that. Maybe you weren't a parent, and now you are. Congrats! Cute little baby over here. Oh my goodness. This is making preaching way better today. Maybe you were living somewhere else and now you're living in the Tri-Cities. Welcome. That's a boundary line that Allie and I crossed this past year. We were in Seattle, now we're here. We like this place a lot. We're not going anywhere. We have boundary lines in our lives. And it's important to recognize these rivers, recognize these boundary lines, and then figure out what to do next. At the river, three things are going to happen. We're going to see it today. We're going to see people reflect on where they've been. The desert, perhaps, that they were just in, and reflect on the lessons that they learned, the experiences they had. At the river, you prepare for the next step. Okay, I'm moving into the promised land. What does that mean? Who do I have to become if I want to be a citizen of the promised land? The last thing you do at the river is you mark the place. You make a marking. So you remember that you crossed, and so that other people can make the crossing as well. A lot of cool things happen at the river. So we're going to read Joshua 3 together. You're saying, verse what? Verse all of them. We're going to read the entirety of Joshua 3. I know that's a big, meaty morsel to try to cover up. We're going to break it down, don't worry.
All right, Joe.
Read this along with me. Joshua 3, verse 1. Early in the morning. Anybody convicted yet? Early in the morning, Joshua and all the Israelites set out from Shittim and went to the Jordan, where they camped before crossing over. After 3 days, the officers went throughout the camp, giving orders to the people. When you see the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, your God, and the priests who are Levites carrying it, you are to move out from your positions and follow it. Then you will know which way to go, since you have never been this way before. But keep a distance of about 1,000 yards between you and the ark. Do not go near it. Joshua told the people, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you. Joshua said to the priests, take up the Ark of the Covenant and pass on ahead of the people. So they took it up and went ahead of him. Sometimes when people say things, you just got to do them. And the Lord said to Joshua, today I will begin to exalt you in the eyes of all Israel, so that they may know that I am with you as I was with Moses. Tell the priests who carry the Ark of the Covenant, when you reach the edge of the Jordan's waters, go and stand in the river. Joshua said to the Israelites, come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God. This is how you will know that the living God is among you, and that He will certainly drive out before you the Canaanites, Hittites, Hivites, Perizzites, Girgashites, Amorites, all those ites. See, the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, all the earth will go into the Jordan ahead of you. Now then, choose 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one from each tribe, and as soon as the priests who carry the Ark of the Lord of all the earth, set foot in the Jordan, its waters flowing downstream will be cut off and stand up in a heap. So when the people broke camp across the Jordan, the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant went ahead of them. Now the Jordan is at flood stage, all during the harvest. Yet as soon as the priests who carried the Ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing. It piled up in a heap a great distance away at a town called Adam, in the vicinity of Zarethan, while the water flowing down to the Sea of Araba, the Salt Sea, was completely cut off. So the people crossed over opposite Jericho. The priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stood firm on dry ground in the middle of the Jordan, while all Israel passed by until the whole nation had completed the crossing on dry ground. We did it. Congrats. You just read a whole chapter of the Bible. Let me introduce you to the Jordan River. There it is. That's not a very good picture. Hopefully you can see that on the screen. Can I get a thumbs up? Maybe a thumbs middle? It's not so good. Maybe a thumbs down? No, I'm sorry. You're wearing sunglasses. You don't get an excuse.
It's a glare.
This is the Jordan River. And the Jordan River flows north to south from one sea to another. And it's this boundary line. It's this divider of the whole region. And the Israelites at this point are on the right side, the east side of the Jordan River. And they're hanging out. And they're planning their next step. But there is a land. A promised land. God promised them everything west of the river. And they've been thinking about this moment. They've been thinking about this special day. They've been thinking about the movement they're about to make for 40 years. Anybody 40? I'm not 40, I'm only 28. It's okay. No shame at 40. Very good thing. What have you been doing for 40 years besides breathing? Anything? 40 years you've been waiting to cross this river, and today is the day. And what Joshua is saying to the people is he says, get up, we're going to cross, but you need to take your past with you. Everything that happened in the desert, all that wandering for 40 plus years, everything since Egypt, you're going to take it with you in the form of the Ark of the Covenant. Do you know what that word covenant means? Essentially it means contract, it means promise. The Ark of the Promise. That God made a promise to you about what kind of people you were going to get to be, what your lives were going to look like, what your relationship with Him was going to look like, and you get to bring that with you into this new stage. It's pretty cool. Yeah. They're bringing their past with them. And they're letting it go before them. Maybe you've read the first 5 books of the Bible. It's called the Torah, according to our Jewish friends and brothers and sisters. And these 5 books, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, each serve a certain purpose. And I've only got 3 here, but you could argue that the Jewish people are bringing their entire history with them across the Jordan into this new phase. They're taking their past with them. They're bringing Numbers. As I said before, for 40 years, these folks have just been waiting out, wandering, waiting for their chance to cross the river. And what God had promised was because the Israelites were so stiff-necked, that means obstinate, that means stubborn, no Israelites of the past generation were going to get to cross the river. The only people crossing the river, except for Joshua son of Nun and Caleb, all newbies. They've spent their entire lives waiting for this moment. It was a promise that was given to their parents, and yet they get to fulfill it. I think that's pretty cool. So they bring Numbers with them. They bring Leviticus with them in the form of the Ark. Right? The Leviticus book, it's just laws and codes and regulations. How are you supposed to live your life? They're bringing the Ark, the promise, with them. They're bringing Exodus with them as well. What goes on at this river, right? First step in, the waters part. Have you heard that story before? Maybe seen it in a movie. Just like the Red Sea parts in Exodus, the Israelites are bringing their past with them. And it's all led to this incredible moment where they get to cross the river. Have you ever had a river crossing moment? Where you go, finally, I got my driver's license. It's a new era in my life. Yeah. Finally! She said yes, and we're going to get married. Finally, I graduated. Finally, I'm healthy. Finally, I get to leave my house and go worship in person. We have these rivers that we cross, and sometimes it feels really good to cross the river and to take our past with us, and sometimes it's really, really scary. Yeah. I think that there are times where we don't like to bring our past with us. Sometimes we cross rivers. Sometimes we move into new phases of our lives because we're trying to run from something. I don't like who I used to be in the desert. So I'm going to cross the river and start a new life for myself. Those experiences, those bad experiences, let's not talk about that. I was a different person. That wasn't me. That's not me anymore. And so we leave lessons and stories and examples in the desert when they should be coming with us. They should be going out ahead of us. The truth is, you bring stories and you bring examples and experiences with you every single step of the way. Whether you want to or not, you are carrying an ark across the river as you move into a new phase. You have biases, you have prejudices, you have fears and doubts that are coming with you whether you want them or not. And so just like the Israelites, just like Joshua says, let it go before you and shape the land that you're going into. I remember when Allie and I got engaged. I was very happy. It was a good day. And I enjoyed it very much. Yeah. I was scared too, because I'd never been married before. And I thought, am I going to do a very good job at this? I had times in my life where I'd been hurt in relationships. I had times in my life where I saw unhealthy marriages and unhealthy relationships, and I didn't want that. And I had these biases, and I had these fears that I was bringing with me no matter what. And what's incredible is when you move into that new phase of your life, those bad experiences get reshaped and reconfigured into something new. The fears, the doubts, the examples, the stories that the Israelites brought with them shaped their. Take your past, let it go out in front of you. It's a hard task, but it is a worthy task. They also brought Genesis. I'll take you back to verse 9. I believe it's on the screen. Yes. Chapter 3, verse 9. I lost it. Joshua said to the Israelites, come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God. This is how you will know that the living God is among you, and that he will certainly drive out before you all of those ites. See, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth will go into the Jordan ahead of you. He says, don't forget Genesis. Don't forget the very beginning of your story. There is a God who is alive, who is the creator and the ruler of the entire earth. And so you have nothing to fear. You're moving into a scary new phase of your life. You are in a movement, you are in a moment, but don't worry because God's got it. That's pretty cool. That's one of those amens.
Yeah.
There it is. I like that a lot. He says, take your past with you. He says, send it out before you. He says, consecrate yourself. He says, what did I put here? He says, prepare for the next step. Joshua 3, verse 5. Joshua told the people, consecrate yourselves. For tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you. He says, get ready because you have never seen anything like this. Make yourselves holy. Make yourselves sacred. Be purified because there's stuff that's going to happen in the promised land that you are not going to believe. God's going to do amazing things among you. And this idea of consecration is a really interesting and special one in Scripture. A lot of things can be consecrated. We can be consecrated. We can be holy people. Raisin cakes can be consecrated. So it's not that special. Raisin cakes, bread, there's a lot of things that can be consecrated, that can be made holy for God. And Joshua says, do that to yourselves. Take tonight and prepare. So take your past with you, think about, reflect on what happened in your desert, and then start getting ready for what comes next. Any athletes with me? Whitney, professional softball player. Allie was a collegiate rower. You don't get to do that. You're a collegiate athlete. Ash is an athlete. Played the game today. Did you guys win? Let's go. Of course you won. Athletes know what visualization means. I'm sure you've had a coach before in your life. Maybe you've had a counselor or a therapist or a mentor who's talked to you about visualization. Think through what's going to happen. That is part of what this consecration idea is. Joshua is saying, look, you aren't ready for what's about to happen to you. You've never been to this place before, so you've got to think through it. Get your mind right. Visualize. They've probably been visualizing for 40 years. They've had the promised land hyped up in unreal ways, and maybe they've got an overinflated sense of what the promised land is going to be like. And they might get hurt when they go over there because they thought it was going to be easy. Have we experienced that before? That feeling of like, oh, once I get a job, everything will be great. That'll solve all my problems. Once I make this amount of money. Once I have this relationship. Once I bought this. Once I cross that line, that's when I'm going to be living a good life. Right? That's when things get easy. What happens is because we only visualize the good. Because we only prepare ourselves for good things and happy things and joyous moments and sunlight, ooh, things can get dark in the promised land sometimes. And we're going to see in Israel's history that some sketchy, some scary, some unfortunate things happen in the promised land. I don't move backwards. I want to move forwards. What is the promised land? Take a second here and reflect on that. What is your promised land right now? It's probably a place you've never been to before. Maybe it's your dream home, dream relationship, your dream outfit. Allie and I have a dream home. It's on Canal Drive. It overlooks the river. This gigantic white house on an acre-and-a-half property. I may or may not have looked it up. And it's everything I ever wanted in a house. And it's huge. And it's got this huge covered back porch that's got books on it. Like huge shelves of books. And I'm like, oh, it's incredible. And it's got this huge kitchen. And Allie's like, oh, I can make so much good stuff there. And it's got a big yard. Our dog's like, I could run there. It's our promised land. It's our dream home. And we haven't thought about the cost. We haven't thought about how much it's going to cost to upkeep it. Taxes. I'm 28, I don't think about taxes, come on. Our promised land is a beautiful thing. It's a good thing to have a promised land, but you've got to consecrate your mind and your heart and prepare for the inevitable chaos that comes with the new phase of life. Take your past with you, reflect on it, let it go out ahead of you, and prepare for the next step. That is very difficult to do. And the Israelites don't do a great job. I'll warn you ahead of time. Maybe you haven't read ahead. If you have read ahead, you know that the rest of the Old Testament is essentially the Israelites' ups and downs. We'll call it that, right? Their victories and their losses in the Promised Land. God has a beautiful vision of what the Promised Land is going to be for them. And spoiler alert, the Promised Land isn't actually a place. Like, yes, it's Canaan, yes, there's Jerusalem, Holy Mountain, all that good stuff. But really, the Promised Land is a state of being. The promise is what defines the people.
Let's go, Josh.
The promise of Israel, the promise of a kingdom of priests, the promise of real, lasting, permanent relationship with God. That's the promised land. But the people get caught up on land, property, dividing lines, vineyards, kings, rulers, money, commerce, agriculture, business. The promised land gets polluted and it becomes this very tangible, very not spiritual thing, and they make a lot of mistakes perpetually. And they have some victories. Some good things happen in the promised land, and some promises are kept and fulfilled by God and by the people. But a lot of them aren't. And we've got to prepare for this possibility that our promised land is not exactly what we think it is. That it might be a way that we are rather than a place that we get to. Take your past with you. Consecrate for the future. And then the last thing you're supposed to do at the river is mark the place. Let's read Joshua chapter 4. Not the whole thing. Kind of quite enough of that. Joshua chapter 4, verse 1. When the whole nation had finished crossing the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, choose 12 men from among the people, one from each tribe, and tell them to take up 12 stones. Sweet. 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, right where the priest stood, and to carry them over with you and put them down at the place where you stay tonight. So Joshua called together the 12 men he had appointed from the Israelites, one from each tribe, and said to them, go over before the ark of the Lord, your God, into the middle of the Jordan. Each of you is to take up a stone on his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the Israelites, to serve as a sign among you. In the future, when your children ask you, what do these stones mean? Tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. These stones are to be a memorial to the people of Israel forever. So the Israelites did as Joshua commanded them. They took 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, according to the number of the tribes of the Israelites, as the Lord had told Joshua, and they carried them over with them into their camp, where they put them down. Joshua set up 12 stones that had been in the middle of the Jordan at the spot where the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant had stood, and they are there to this day. 12 stones to mark the place. I thought we'd do something a little bit artistic and poetic today. If you're live streaming and you can't see us, 12 stones. They're probably bigger than these stones. And why admire aren't that strong? We don't do CrossFit like Dan and Liz. So, medium-sized stones laid out as a memorial of the place. I think that's a very cool thing. You know, these stones have a purpose. They're not just visually appealing. They're not a cool artistic thing that you do on a Sunday. They're a lasting reminder of who God is and what God does. It's a reminder of where you've been. He says there in verse 6, I believe. Verse 6. In the future, when your children ask you, what do these stones mean? Tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the Ark of the Covenant. So people are going to ask you when you crossed. What did it look like? What did it feel like? Where did that happen? Oh, just go to the stones. I have a clear marker in my life of what God has done and where I've been. The second thing that you're supposed to remember in verse 23 of chapter 4. For the Lord your God dried up the Jordan before you, and so you had crossed over. The Lord your God did to the Jordan just what he had done to the Red Sea when it dried up before us, and so we had crossed over. He did this so that all the peoples of the earth might know that the hand of the Lord is powerful, and so that you might always fear the Lord your God. I'm going to read that one more time. He did this so that all the peoples of the earth might know that the hand of the Lord is powerful, and so that you might always fear the Lord your God. Have a memorial in your life. Have a marker in your life so that people ask, when they ask, what is different about you? You're just different. What's going on in your life? What has led you to this moment? You can go, look at who my God is. He wants you to know who he is.
Yeah.
He wants you to fear him and respect him, and he wants you to make the same crossings. What are our memorials? It could be a lot of things, right? It could be a place. For some of us, it's the Red Lion Hotel. Is that a memorial for our church? Whenever you drive by that sign, you go like, oh yeah, yep, that's how we used to be. That was a crossing moment for us. Maybe it's St. Paul's Episcopal Church. I only got to go there once or twice. Maybe St. Paul's Episcopal Church is a marker for you, a memorial. Yeah, our church was there for a while. Sometimes places are markers. Sometimes journals are markers. I keep a lot of journals, things that I'm feeling, things that I'm praying about, and it's fun to go back and go, whoa, I was messed up. Holy cow. It's important to have markers. Sometimes tattoos are markers. That's great. My wife has a couple tattoos. And I love that about her. I love that she has markers to remind her what she really cares about in life. There's one for her family and there's one for God, back of her neck. I think it's cool. Lots of things can be markers. Sometimes it is a physical thing like a stone or a sign or a picture hanging on your wall. Maybe it's a painting, maybe it's a sculpture, but I encourage you to think about the big moments in your life and to try to figure out what your markers are. Because markers are signs of relationships. Markers are signs of progress in your journey. This is a marker. My wedding ring. This is a marker. And it's a marker of a moment. My wedding day, that's a good day. That was a good moment. She's forgot about it. But it's also a marker of movement. That I've been moving forward in my life with a new person. And that we're going to keep moving forward. And that we've been to some crazy places and we're headed towards some crazy places, but we are moving together.
Yeah.
What are your markers? What are your memorials? Because other people are going to make these crossings as well. You're going to have friends and neighbors and roommates and family members who go, hey, you got married. Hey, you sought God at one point in your life. I remember how crazy you used to be. You're going to have family members or friends or roommates or neighbors who are going to go, hey, I'm looking for a change in my life. I'm looking for something meaningful and special, the way that you have it. How did you get there? How cool would it be to go, well, let me show you some stones. I've made a marker in my life. This is how I made the crossing, and it could be how you make the crossing as well. There are a lot of crossings in our lives. There's a lot of boundary lines that get crossed into new eras and new stages. And I want to encourage you to think about your markings. Think about your memorials. 3 things you do at the river. You reflect on your past. You think about what God has done and who He has shaped you into up to this moment. You prepare for the next step. You consecrate yourself like a sacred raisin cake. You make yourself holy, you visualize, you prepare for the next step, and the last thing you do is you mark the place. So that you can remember what God has done in your life, and so that you can show others how to get to where you're at. What a beautiful thing that Israel does for their children. What a beautiful thing that we can do for our children, for our friends, for our neighbors, as we show them, hey, this is where I've got to with God. It's a promised land. I promise you it is good. I promise you it's crazy. I promise you there's going to be ups and downs, but I promise you it's good. If you want to go there, here's the crossing. Here's where God did an amazing thing in my life. Here's where He saved me. Here's where He spared me. Here's where He changed me, transformed me, converted me into something and someone new. Take Him to the river. Show Him the stones and let Him know who your God is. We're going to talk about all kinds of funky stuff at the river. We're going to do some really cool things in the next 3 months. We're going to talk about purity, about cleansing, about refreshment, provision, God's flow, living water, which I'm very excited about, and boundaries. We're going to go down to the river. We're going to do some wild things. We're going to talk about some challenging stuff, and I encourage you to come with us as we make camp by the river. There are movements and there are moments. That's what I want to leave you guys with here. Our story as a church, our story as individuals is a movement. We're always becoming somebody new. God is always doing something new to and for us. But there are also moments. This might be one of them. I love you guys. Grace and peace to you.